Thank you, Roseanne. Well, it's a pleasure to see everybody today. We're going to kick it off. Our goal today is to keep it really open and interactive. So if we bring up a topic that you'd like further clarification on, you don't have to wait till the end. We'd like your hands to go up, and we'll try to keep this as interactive as possible. We're going to cover today, we have a fun topic, which is how to make predictive analytics a reality in your business. And we're going to, go through the journey of like traditional forecasting approaches and like a new way of thinking and why now, and why consider this in today's environment. And then share with you some examples, and like I said, Q&A, but Q&A throughout would be great. So I'm Lisa David. I'm one of the partners and owners of eCapital. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Our office is actually up on the 13th floor of this building. I started my career as a CPA and auditor in public accounting at Arthur Andersen out of the Minneapolis office. And for those of you who were around in those days, there's a nice event called Enron that happened. And we were all to become Deloitte managers. And I had gone through one busy season with a newborn baby. And I decided it was a good time to take a torch and maybe do something differently. And so for the last 19 and a half, almost 20 years, I've been at eCapital. My passion is really helping educate and translate basically plain English technical terms on how you can have this and be successful with your data. But it's a pleasure to be here today. Ryan?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So my name is Ryan Koehler, also with eCapital Advisors. I'm one of our analytics practice leaders. I've been with eCapital for about 10 years now, and my passion is really just helping kind of unlock the power of data for the organizations that we partner with. And speaking of data, I think, trying to set the mood here a little bit, we wanted to talk about our data dogs here that help with our data journey. So, Lisa's good friend Macy here, and then my old bulldog Izzy keeps us company throughout the day, especially through this work from home environment that we've been in for so long. And then I can also prove to you with my headshot there that I did used to look somewhat professional before COVID, but I've really just kind of let the hair go. So I can look professional when I need to, though.
A fun story about the data dogs from last night. So I was in the stands of Burnsville High School last night. My daughter's on the varsity dance team for Prior Lake High School, and I was sitting next to a finance executive from United Health Group that I've gotten to know through dance, and it's fun to sit by him in the stands because we like to talk data. And he literally is the dad who so they named the top 4 placements last night. He gets up at 5 in the morning today and downloads all of the individual judging scores and runs a data sheet on basically, and now he told me last night, he started to put the judges' initials next to the score. So in the stands last night, I'm sitting next to him and his wife and stuff, and I said, well, Scott, we could run a predictive algorithm on these people and their biases to scoring. And his wife and my husband are like, okay, guys. This is about dance, and here you are talking predictive analytics in the stands. So we decided that he and I were data dogs, but Ryan and I like our data bulldogs.
Exactly.
So just I kind of gave the story of the timing of Enron, but it is kind of funny to today's topic, because literally, for those of you, again, 20 years ago, there was basically a first-generation planning tool that was headquartered out of Minneapolis called Adata. And it was right over here by the Mall of America. And of course, so 20 years ago, it was basically going to meet with CFOs and finance leaders and basically saying, stick your neck out and decide that there's a better way to do a budget and forecast than having to do a separate workbook every time. And so that's how eCapital's journey started, was an on-premise, best-of-breed planning, kind of first-generation planning tool, headquartered just down the road. And we continued that journey of evolution, really focused on serving our business executives, partnering with IT, but really trying to help our finance leaders with budgeting, forecasting, what-if scenarios, consolidation, reporting tools. And then it continues to evolve into this next generation in today's topic. So it's a fun conversation of 20 years ago to today. It's the same conversation. Stick your neck out there. There is a way for you to have easier data insight than maybe has been led on to you from your IT counterparts. So on that, you want to talk about kind of eCapital space?
Yeah, sure. So eCapital as a whole, we handle a lot of different capabilities for the organizations that we partner with. This is really kind of the heavy hitters though. So as Lisa mentioned, we're a strong performance management house, right? A lot of forecasting, budgeting, consolidation type skill sets on our teams. We also have a strong analytics team that does a lot more than just BI, right? We do a lot of our data science and data engineering type use cases as well for the organizations that we partner with. And one thing you'll see here is we've kind of rebranded our data science team as business data science. And the reason for this is we really want to try to understand what the problem is on the business that we're trying to face or solve before we just jump in and throw crazy algorithms at it, right? And we'll touch on that a little bit today as well.
Yeah, and we really believe that finance can own it.
Yes.
I mean, you could still someday maybe have a separate data science team, but having it a separate data science team and having it be a silo again, you're back to the same problem. You're back to the data silos, and you're not solving that business use case need that is that is going to improve your profitability, your gross margin. So it's really kind of like getting deep in that business use case and then putting the algorithms with it.
Absolutely. And last but not least, we do have an automation team as well. So robotic process automation is kind of the new trendy topic, right? But we can automate things kind of across the board with or without traditional RPA tools themselves. So don't need to spend too much time on this, but I do want to kind of share with you kind of our overall philosophy, right? A lot of times we'll partner with organizations and start the relationship off with more of kind of an assessment phase, right? We want to understand kind of what your strategies are, what your goals are, right? What your challenges are that you're facing, so that we don't have a one-size-fits-all solution for every organization that we partner with. And really, the way we do this is we look at people, process, and technology, right? So we're a lot more than just a technology shop where we're just trying to fit one solution into every single scenario. And we strongly believe that it really does start with the data, right? I think that's if we have better conversations with our data, that really unlocks the door for a lot more advanced analytics use cases and can help kind of support the entire ecosystem. So we strongly believe it starts with the data. And to break this down a little bit further, this is kind of our value ecosystem, if you will. So, we work with all sorts of different data sources, right? We're not just a firm that works with just one ERP, for example. Most of the projects that we work on from an analytics perspective, we're going to have data coming from CRM systems, warehouse management systems, right? Anything in the world of finance that you can think of that will help kind of paint the full picture, and going a little bit further than just your traditional ERP, right? And we like to use this philosophy of a modern data hub, right? We strongly believe that if we can get all of your data in one spot, right, it makes it a lot easier to generate speed to insight for the organization, right? Those of us in the room who have had to kind of tackle complex data challenges, I think we recognize that a lot of the heavy lifting is just that, right? It's trying to identify and understand where our data is and how do we get that in an accessible spot, right? Not so much the work on the front end, right?
And a key reason that's been fascinating for me, just having the finance background, is that the ERP systems were they were architected in a very particular way, which was to process transactions. They weren't architected in a way to make it easy for you to see your subledger data. And so what's been fascinating over the 20-year journey is that having this innovation, which actually, if we were doing this presentation 10 years ago, this didn't even exist. So basically, engineers that came from the ERP world realized that this is a problem. I could never see my subledger, accounts receivable, accounts payable down to the penny, so that the collections person, their day in the life would be so much cleaner and simpler. It was just a pain, no matter what the ERP was, to get data out. And these type of tools always are at an aggregated level. So you're not going to plan your business at a SKU level. Your head would explode. So this is an aggregated level, but there's still insights that could affect your month if I could see it easy. So that was really fascinating just in the journey, that the architecture of ERP and other source systems make it difficult to really drive that insight that's really, really valuable. So it's been really fun in the last few years to have that innovation available. Because now our customer teams, this is again the auditor in me, imagine a dashboard where you can have a top level KPI and you can go all the way to the penny to whether it's 200,000 transactions to the penny. That's now available, and it's so fast. And that's hugely valuable because there's always these mysteries of like, oh, where's the problem? Oh, it's the national account that caused the pricing problem. No, it's actually not. Somebody gave a discount to this mom and pop shop, and that's causing the problem. So it's like you now have that answer, and it's not this mystery of everybody bringing a spreadsheet to a meeting and saying, well, where did you do your data pull from? What time of day did you do your data pull from? I'm right. I'm sure nobody's ever had a meeting like that, right? But anyway, just wanted to, and then of course, our software bots, our automation bots can, if it's a pain to go if you have to get data from banks, you have to get data and move it all the time, all those tedious manual tasks, that's a fun one as far as the last 2 years. If you saw like what the automation industry was, how fast it was going to grow, there was like this slow the roll curve. That curve's completely changed because we kind of have blown up the idea of like all the people working in the same office, moving data together. So anyway, that's really added a lot of efficiencies.
Yeah, absolutely. And we wanted to show you kind of this value ecosystem, if you will, just to give you a sense of kind of what we do, day in the life, right? We're not just working in transactional data worlds. We're not just working in an EPM solution, right? Really kind of all-encompassing, trying to help our customers drive value with the finance organizations, right? Here's our good old NASCAR slide. Just got to throw that up there quickly. So shameless plug for us. But before I jump into kind of talking a little bit about traditional forecasting and what we typically see with the customers that we partner with, I want to kind of pull the room here real quick just to put you guys on the spot. So, who in the room has heard of the concept of predictive analytics? Just high level. Okay, that's what I thought. Who is actually implementing it right now at your organization? Oh, nice. Do you mind me asking, like, kind of what function of the organization? Is it true finance use cases? Is it?
So it's a little bit of both. We have a whole group that is in analytics at BDO. We're a public accounting firm. So we have a whole group that's focused on predictive analytics and doing that for our customer base, depending on who our client is and what they're looking to analyze out.
Great.
But I think one of the things that we're using it for most is like the different, what we're thinking is like the different fluctuations of businesses in the future and how like with the market right now with COVID and what we need to focus our attention on in taxes. So
totally.
It's trying to be proactive. Our goal is to be more proactive for our clients so that we're looking at the problems and seeing the problems before they actually happen for the client.
That's great. Yeah, that's spot on. And can I ask, how long have you guys had this in place?
I know we've been working through this group for years. It's probably been maybe 5 years in the making.
Okay, wow. So you guys are definitely ahead of the curve, I think, from what we typically see, so that's great to hear. Kind of the unicorn in the room, so to speak, so congrats. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm sure you can kind of shed some light on some of our perspectives as well throughout the presentation, so I'm happy to hear kind of your feedback there too, so that's great. So I guess with that being said, we have one team in the room here that's actively deploying predictive analytics. How about the rest of us in the room? Is anyone have this as an initiative for 2022? A potential initiative? Okay. All right. Well, hopefully we can maybe shift that to get some people to lean in a bit. So what I want to do first here is talk a little bit about kind of our traditional forecasting, budgeting, planning processes, right? And this isn't to say that I'm poking holes in those processes, right? I think there's definitely a necessity for those to exist at organizations, right? I'm not going to tell you guys should totally scrap your corporate budgeting and forecasting process. I know there's a lot of dynamics there, right? I think what I'm trying to articulate through today's presentation is how the two can work together, right? And kind of create the best of both worlds and drive an ecosystem that can actually drive to actionable decisions. So, with that being said, I do like to kind of introduce the concept of predictive analytics by talking a little bit about the traditional approach. And, in what I've seen in the industry, and just to give you a sense of kind of my background as it relates to forecasting and budgeting, I worked 10 plus years in the enterprise performance management space. So I used to be a big Oracle guy, used to deploy Essbase, Hyperion Planning, HFM, all that good stuff. So I've seen in a variety of different industries kind of the pain points that exist, different processes, right? So trying to kind of share that insight with you. What I've seen, right, is oftentimes these forecasting processes are very dependent on the close cycles, right? So, typically there's a work day, maybe -2 through a work day, who knows, right? And there's very defined processes. And a lot of these activities from a forecasting perspective, right, are dependent on some of those things being closed from an actual perspective, right, before certain allocations can kick off, things like that, right? And so, although that's important to kind of create that synergy through the organization, right, when you want to adapt on the fly, though, and you want to move quickly, create some pain points there, right? The other piece here, too, in my experience is, I think a lot of times, throughout the year, a lot of the assumptions really stay associated to the budget, right? We're oftentimes trying to figure out ways to justify our budget, kind of work towards it, and kind of save it, if you will, right? And I think that can cause kind of some challenges throughout the year. And Lisa kind of touched on this as well. You're never going to plan or forecast your business at a SKU level detail, right? That's crazy, right? And so a lot of times the actual detail that you need to really get insights into your data, you're not going to have that same level of detail from a forecasting or budgeting perspective. Or if you do, right, it's just some allocation process. It's not real data, if you will, right? And so I think that obviously creates some misalignment there too. And I think the last three here on the bottom, kind of related in my opinion. A lot of the forecasting cycles that I see, really focus on rest of year analysis, right? So maybe we start with a 2+10 forecast, work our way into a 10+2. We see organizations that in the month of November are literally just forecasting December, right? And I think, trying to get to a point where, we're working towards seeing more vision into the future, right? A rolling 12, a rolling 18, right? I think that's what people are really looking to drive insights out of.
Or customers, email. We have so many customers that it's each month it takes them over 2.5 weeks to get that month's forecast done. Well, it's almost over before they ever got done. And it doesn't. The cool part about kind of this industry though is that you'd be shocked. It's like you can drive so much impact so fast nowadays by just adding some of these enhancements. But the stories are funny. We never shocked to get amazed each week on who we talk to.
Yeah, and I think, when we talk about customized driver logic and allocations, right, I'm guilty of the guy building this stuff in the past, right? So, I've been the one that has built all these crazy allocations that remove some of that transparency because that was the best way to do things, 5-10 years ago. I think what we'll talk about through the rest of today's presentation is maybe a new way of thinking and how you can kind of enable, your pockets of the organization to be more nimble and get better actions out of your data. So I think we've kind of hit on most of these already, but just kind of some of the challenges that this presents, right? I think the number one is probably time consuming, right? Maybe a quick poll of the room. Who's doing a monthly forecast? A few of us. Who's more like a quarterly basis from a formal perspective? Okay, gotcha. So, how long does that process typically take you guys, if you want to just throw a couple numbers out there? Is that weeks? Is it months? What does that process look like from a quarterly forecast perspective? That long, huh? Years?
I can say we usually do ours for 1 year in advance, but we do it on a monthly basis, what we assume on a monthly basis. And to get us to that case, to get us to that forecast usually takes us out.
Sure, yeah, gotcha. And then by the time that forecast is completed, it's probably out of date already, right? Yeah, exactly. So, I think we've hit on most of these. I think a couple of them that we haven't, though, is the concept of incorporating external data sets, I think, which is becoming more and more important because of how readily available this stuff is, right? When we think about, COVID, right, the whole pandemic, we have organizations that tapped into the Johns Hopkins database very quickly and started bringing COVID case data at a state zip code level into their ecosystem, right? When you have that type of information readily available to mash up against your sales order detail, right, from a retailer standpoint, that can be really powerful, right? We have an organization that we partner with, Duluth Trading, very popular name, right? They were one of them that actually got this COVID data in right away. Duluth Trading, at least my mindset on that, was typically kind of male apparel, right? I didn't see Duluth Trading being a place where a lot of women shopped, right? Well, what they found, though, was with this COVID case data, the states where COVID cases were exploding at the start of the pandemic, the women apparel was flying off the shelf, So they were able to very quickly completely reposition their promotional patterns to go after more of the women apparel, and they had this information all the way down to a style, a color, a
Fabric.
size perspective, right? That is some actionable decisions that you can get with your data right there. So I think when you think about that, don't just think about your internal data that's available to you more easily. It's so much faster to get that external data sets incorporated into your ecosystem today.
Especially if you're like in their case, in our, and again, our grocery world, or any of you in the world who are there, you have an e-commerce platform that's gone, completely doubled in volume. That value of even what you put on, what you do or don't put on sale is, huge. And
Sure.
It was fascinating to see this female. I just told them women needed more, mental therapy. We couldn't handle it, so being locked up didn't work. We had to shop online.
I like it.
But yeah, it went all the way down to the fabric that they're purchasing. Of course, you're gonna knock tops more than bottoms. We didn't need to buy bottoms. We just needed to buy tops. We had to be on Zoom. So it's just been fascinating to see their data trend lines, and the fact that their executives now every day have a daily executive sales dashboard that they can drill down to anything, any state. E-commerce, in-store, everything. It's all in one place.
Yeah.
And in their case, if you think about Duluth Trading, they're like what, 25, 30-year-old privately held?
Yep.
When you talk about disparate data sources, there was a lot of them to combine to get this insight. So, again, but that's a very normal situation. If you've grown over 25, 30 years, you're going to have data silos. You've changed, and your business, in their case, their business has changed a ton.
Are you running regression analysis, delta? What are you doing to get to the analytics?
Yeah, great question. So from a predictive standpoint, there's a lot of different options out there. And I'll touch on that in a few slides if you don't mind, just in a little bit more detail. But I think that's one of the reasons where I think it's a really good time to explore predictive analytics, because the algorithms that are out there are a lot different than were out there, say, 5-10 years ago, right? There are ways we can take a year's worth of data with active data at a detailed level and still really produce heavy seasonality, pick up on outliers, all that good stuff. Whether it's regression, auto-arima, there's a lot of different options out there, but that really helps kind of streamline that process. So, why don't we go into kind of this new way of thinking, good segue, and I can touch on some of your questions in more detail here. I think, again, I want to reiterate, I'm not trying to say you should stop your traditional corporate forecasting and budgeting process. Totally understand there's a place and a time for it, right? What I'm trying to say is when you get into some of the ad hoc analysis that's out there, and if you want to really try to kind of remove some of these silos in the organization where you don't necessarily have one source of truth, you have Tommy over here doing one thing, and you have Sherry over here doing something different, right? I think when we can kind of create an ecosystem that brings all this together to support that on the fly, everyone is at least looking at the same numbers, right? Which is really important, I think. And the other piece I want to encourage people to think about a little bit as we're walking through the next few slides is you don't have to boil the ocean here, right? I'm also not proposing let's take your entire forecasting and budgeting process across the organization and do it all with predictive algorithms, right? That's crazy talk, right? I like to prefer to start with something micro, right? Start with a pain point or start with something that's very time consuming today, and let's start there, prove the value, figure out what works with the data that you have available and what might not work as well, right? And that gives you a better measuring stick on how to evaluate future use cases moving forward. So hopefully that kind of makes sense here. When we talk about predictive analytics, I just want to make this as simple as possible, right? I think a lot of times when we talk about predictive analytics, data science, right? A lot of our job is kind of demystifying some of the myths that are out there, right? Sure, 10 years ago, maybe it was a little bit of a different animal, but I think today, we can actually develop these type of use cases very quickly, and we can empower kind of that power user on the business side, and don't always have to have like an official data scientist with 10 years of education behind their belt, right, to support some of this stuff. So to me, right, predictive analytics is taking data from an organization, right, from a historical standpoint, along with our live kind of up-to-date data and learning from that, right? And I've mentioned this already, taking our traditional data sources like ERP, financial systems, along with external data sets, and even Excel files when we need to, right? And bringing all this data together and taking our historical trends, learning from that, picking up on seasonality, picking up on anomaly, kind of reporting and outlier detection, as well as adding in features that really allow us then to incorporate kind of dynamic variables into our learning process. And then from that, right, repeatable and translatable machine learning algorithms to spit out kind of our what is most likely to happen, right? Removing the mental math is another way I like to describe this, right? And these are kind of some of the three most popular, kind of outcomes of kind of predictive analytics in my mind that we see with our customers is certainly identifying trends in seasonality, right, from a traditional predictive approach, but also being able to do things like prevent customer churn, right? So think about some of the use cases that are out there in a data science world. We have a predictive flair to any of this stuff, right? So it's not like a predictive analytics use case is just, taking my historical data, trying to figure out what the seasonality looks like and kind of pushing the plow forward. We can do a lot more with that as we add more features to this. So you can look at things like price elasticity from a future standpoint. You can look at customer churn. You can look at fraud detection, right? And I think when you incorporate some of these type of algorithms with a predictive nature, that's when you're getting the most bang for your buck, right? So, yeah, question.
Something that I like in the theme of today that I think maybe would be a good one too would be like on employee turnover.
Yeah,
and
employee attrition for sure.
Yeah, and attrition.
Yeah.
And what are the combinations of salaries, incentives, or whatever that maybe the people who stay longer might have had a certain incentive set that the others who don't stay longer. Like that would be interesting for this right now, this market with the war that we have on talent.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. We're having more and more customers ask for kind of that employee attrition type model, along with almost like performance-based models too. We have a really interesting use case right now where we're working with a customer where we tap into their CRM system and we develop patterns or identify patterns for them and try to figure out and kind of benchmark who's kind of the sandbaggers in the sales organization, right? and what behaviors are actually leading to closed deals. And it's been very interesting for the sales managers that we work with because they may think, Lisa's my star shining employee over here because she talks to me all the time. We go out to lunch, all this good stuff. But gosh, when I really break down the stats, sorry, Lisa, we really got to pick our game up a little bit here, right? So it's been kind of eye-opening to see that. And then the reverse, it's like, hey, this guy over here, he might be quiet, maybe not our traditional sales approach, but man, he's getting stuff done, right? And so I think it's helping these sales managers identify those trends and kind of pick up on some of that stuff. So similar, type of use case, but I think you're definitely spot on.
Employers are able today to also set up automation to go out to things like LinkedIn and all of the employment. You could literally send a report to your company that said, here's the 15 people that are looking for a new job.
Yeah.
I mean, or the other factors that you're bringing up, also identify, instead of having the same approach to all employees, here's my at-risk employees. And then I have a separate program for my at-risk. I need to have engagement and the culture thing that we have that was this morning. I mean, it's a huge problem. One of my favorite HR stories is IBM for years is famous of using predictive analytics to detect expense fraud. They would literally run algorithms to predict who are my employees that are turning in fraudulent expenses. And they were so good at what they found. And
I can imagine some of the things.
The number of people that I know but that we know of just through the years of even working with how many reps you had to work with that were fired. I mean, but they literally ran algorithms on your expense reports. And then they also knew that there's also expense report. If you're turning it in if you're the person who turned it in late and now you're turning it in on time, you're leaving. So there's tons of HR is fun because it's there's a lot to go through, but it's a great one for predictive, and I think it's even going to be more important going forward in this hybrid approach.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think I like to call it as what is most likely to happen, right? Because I think that's really important to understand here too. I think those of us who maybe haven't been through some of this, maybe if you're expecting the absolute silver bullet, easy button, right? There's always a human element to that. And I think that's comforting for the talent in the room here too, right? We're not saying that your jobs are replaced, nothing like that, right? It's more repositioning and giving you the insights a lot faster so that you can actually make actual decisions with your data.
But we have a local retailer that, of course, had a traditional forecasting system at an aggregated category level, but they never had the SKU location day information. And imagine that during the holiday season. So in their case, they were actually putting things on sale too fast. So now they run a forecast, a predictive algorithm forecast on revenue on each down to the SKU level, and it's 50% already in 1 year more accurate than that bottoms up forecast. And just because, again, it's got all the granular detail. So now that you have the granular detail of, okay, you pick this color, rose gold Nike watch, whatever the case is, because it's down to, like when we talked about Duluth trading, it's down to what size, what fabric, what color, what, I mean, that's the details that drive those decisions. And the outlier detail, I think, is fascinating too, because it was hard to depict outliers. So think about that with supply chain right now. Where are my, what's likely to happen that I'm going to be out of stock? How long? I mean, there's tons of analytics you can do right now with supply chain as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question over there, yeah.
I'm just curious, how much of this is dependent from a predictive standpoint on garbage in, garbage out? So a lot of experiences is the data at the lowest level of integrity is suspect. We've got to put governance in, we've got to have a 10, 12-month cleanup of the source data, and you never get there in terms of the front end.
Yep.
Has the algorithms and the intelligence pushed through that, or does it compensate for the fact that you're never going to get clean data on the front end? I'm just curious how dependent
Yeah.
it is now.
No, that's probably a good segue to kind of this next slide on kind of why is now the perfect time to, I think, start looking at something like predictive analytics, right? I think there is something to be said for the garbage in, garbage out context to a certain point, right? I would say that we have other technologies that can partner with kind of more of a predictive analytics standpoint that will help clean that data up a lot faster. And I also say that a lot of the predictive algorithms that are out there, for example, like the Facebook profit algorithm, which is fairly new to the market compared to maybe some of the regression type models in the past, I've seen that be a lot more accurate with less historical data and even removing outliers a lot faster. So there is a lot more to be said for that. I also think what's changed a lot, in my opinion, over the last 5 to 10 years is how we approach some of these projects. So I think in the past we used to kind of treat things in a traditional sense, right? Waterfall approach. We need to identify our requirements, go through our design, build out the entire solution. God knows how long that's going to take, and then finally start to validate it. Now our mentality is rapid prototyping, right? So when we get that data in as fast as we can, and we can start to show output very quickly, we can pick up on what to clean up even faster, and then we can start to hit the marks and get in front of the business to start to validate so much faster too. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. So, let me talk a little bit more, and I'll kind of elaborate on why, I personally feel like it's the perfect time to start looking at this, right? When we look at, say, 5 or 10 years ago, number one, obviously it doesn't even really need to be said, but, cloud computing, is out there now, right? Memory is not super expensive anymore, right? We have deployable solutions that are cloud-based that we can literally swipe a credit card and be up and running, right? That is a game changer, right? We don't have to rely on IT setting up some crazy ecosystem, spending millions of dollars on servers. I mentioned used to do a ton of Oracle stuff, right? I remember when we were there getting into like actual appliances, right? Where you're talking about, $500,000 servers to actually run your business, right? The days of that, it's just not needed anymore, right? So much more scalable and deployable at this point. And that ties into the infrastructure cost reduction standpoint as well. I'll also say there's a lot of user-friendly solutions that are out there now too. Again, you don't have to be a data scientist with 10 years of schooling to attack these use cases anymore. There are technologies out there, like Data Robot, for example, that are really kind of attacking that citizen data scientist, if you will. Someone that's really savvy from a business standpoint, has curiosity from a data perspective, and allows you to essentially kind of point and click, right? I think this concept of kind of auto ML, auto machine learning, is really starting to pick up very heavily. I think that really helps support the business as well.
And I think sometimes that garbage in, garbage out was like all of like, it was basically I was extracting it and hard coding it to move it, where now today it's basically I am taking the source system, whatever that is, at the lowest level, and that is where I start the data mapping. So it's like the games that were played is there was all these hard code. The traditional world was I couldn't do that. So I had to extract out of a source system, design a schema, But so that's where the errors happen. That was the garbage in. Some person 20 years ago hard-coded, fat-fingered something, and that is garbage in, garbage out. That's not the approach anymore. So, I mean, yes, if your source system is wrong, I can't fix, but at the lowest level of granularity, if I map from there, it's a lot cleaner. It's a lot easier to look at and clean. Does that kind of make sense of how they had to deal with that in the past? It was just like, that was the traditional data warehousing approach. I mean, I had to have people, team members that were ETL developers, and they had to basically do all of that, and that's where you ended up with garbage in. I mean, you have a customer in St. Louis, that's a fun one. How many data errors did you find in that data mapping?
Yeah, I mean, it's we're basically taking kind of a legacy setup where we have a lot of traditional transformation from a data standpoint that's going on, where we've had to basically sort through like 15,000 lines of code and filter through all of their hard-coded filtering and values from a transformation standpoint. And what we've done instead is we've taken the data directly from the source and loaded it into a central spot, and then started to add transformation on top of it or augment the data there. But the good news is you have full fidelity. So when you need to remove or change a filter, you have everything there already, and you don't have to go all the way back to the source system.
I completely understand the transactional level. I guess I was thinking also the completeness of it as well. There's a field that you want to get at, and the governance around that, it's only 50% completed 50% of the time. When does it become statistically significant that I'll pull it in, I'm going to use it anyways, I'm going to try and get that other 50% completed before I do that? Or, you know what, you think you need that field, it's actually not that field you want. Here's another way to look at it, something that you've got better.
Yeah, no, definitely. I get that side of it too. So the data governance side certainly can propose some challenges, right, when it's not complete. I think this is where we take a little bit of an approach of looking at that data and assessing it too, because the other piece that we're trying to incorporate here is not a one-size-fits-all model, right? So if you think about like a product hierarchy, for example, right? You may have, total product top of the house, and you may have 20 different product classes, drilling it into subclasses, et cetera, all the way down to the SKU level. But we may find through the governance that only some of those classes are really reliable at this point. Let's run the algorithms at that level and ignore the rest of the noise for now and wait for that to kind of catch up if we think it's statistically significant. So there's ways where we almost do, I guess what I would call data forensics on the ecosystem first before just jumping in and saying, we guarantee we can do this, we guarantee we can do that, right? I think that kind of gives you a scorecard as well internally to say, hey, I got to look in the mirror a little bit. Maybe we're ready to deploy some use cases in a traditional FP&A sense, but our product hierarchies from a manufacturing standpoint just aren't there, right? So a little bit of a give and take there, I think. But the last few here that I'll just touch on real quick, right? And I think we kind of talked about these a little bit impromptu as well. Is just that increased data availability, right? If you want data, and if you can think of data you need, chances are you can find a way to get it today, right? That was not the case, 5-10 years ago. So we'd really like to see the increase there. I talked about more efficient algorithms, right? Especially from a predictive standpoint, right? That Facebook profit algorithm we've had a lot of success with versus some of the traditional approaches. And that just really streamlines speed to insight because we can deploy this algorithm, customize it for your organization, and have real output, in a week to start testing on, right? That's a powerful message. And then the last piece here too, sorry, you wanted to add?
Oh, no.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of us probably have some sort of traditional BI tool in place already. I've found that integration with these traditional BI tools is becoming more seamless, right? And even a lot of these BI tools have some of this kind of one-click ML functionality built in, right? Not going to really help you necessarily scale at an enterprise level, right? But if I'm an end user and I'm drilling down to a certain level of my data and I want to run a prediction at this specific location by this specific SKU, I can click predict, and it will give me an 18-month prediction on that value, right? So there's ways you can incorporate kind of that into your BI platforms as well. But I think what I'm overall saying here, right, is the reason it's the perfect time is you don't have to be a massive organization to support these initiatives anymore, right? It's very affordable from a small to a large enterprise perspective at this point. And honestly, I think this is what can kind of help drive competitive advantage. I think the organizations that we're seeing doing this, they took a chance with COVID and said, hey guys, this is our opportunity to maybe do things a little bit of a different way. And they're starting to see the benefits of it now. Anything to add there, Lisa?
Well, no, but by doing one thing, I was going to add for those organizations that the new BI tools of the world are the Power BI and the Tableaus, and that's your IT teams might come and tell you that's going to fix all problems. Let's just buy Tableau and Power BI. Everything we just talked about this data mapping at the source level, that is the engine underneath the success of Power BI and Tableau. Because if you just do that's putting lipstick on a pig. I mean, Power BI and Tableau are good, but that's lipstick. But doing this exercise of the data, and then if you still want to, then you're go nuts and put power. The person using the report doesn't know that the data is organized and I've got fidelity and it's all accurate and it's true. But I mean, it really adds enhanced value to customer teams that are doing that as well.
Yeah, no, great call out there for sure. I mean, again, going back to it all starts with data. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, is the toolkit the equivalent to the FP&A metaverse now? Or?
I like that. Might have to coin that or steal that one from you.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I like that. Yeah, I think, any other questions on this piece? Okay. So I do want to talk a little bit about how we typically see organizations that we partner with kind of getting started. Again, I don't recommend boiling the ocean, right? That's not our approach. I think maybe in the back. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Ronnie. Can you maybe explain to us a little bit? I mean, I'm sure you guys didn't just boil the ocean, right? You probably tried a couple different things and figured out what worked best, and then really stuck on that one. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and it's not my specialty, it's not in my group. We just use some of their tools. Like
Sure.
we bring them in when we need support on certain things. But I know that part of it was that they had to get sourced information from other parties as well. So we paired with some of our alliance firms
Sure.
to get additional information, because for us, we have a lot of information on companies with the financial statements and everything that we have. But then we also need to know what's happening in the market to compare it against and to kind of pull in trends from the market as well. So one of the difficult things I remember for them setting up was just getting good information from different vendors that we didn't have that information already.
Gotcha. Yeah, which leads to the data availability, right? Yeah, for sure. And I think that's honestly kind of threw me a softball here, right? Going to step one. I mean, that step 1 and 2, I guess, but step 1 is really defining kind of that business problem, right? And this is where I think things are changing from what I've seen, right? Don't get me wrong, the data scientist that I come across from a traditional standpoint, and just so you guys know, I'm not a data scientist, right? I have no formal data science training. I didn't go to school for it, right? I'm more of that citizen data scientist, right? But I think it's really important to define the business problem, because in our experience, what used to happen a lot of times is organizations would say, gosh, we got to try data science. I'm going to go hire some really expensive resources. I'm going to put them in a lab, and they're going to do data science, right? And they're going to figure out ways to create really cool projects for us, right? That's great, right? But a lot of times the feedback we would get on that is they'd go into a cave for 6 months, and they'd come out, and we'd just be like, I have no idea how I'm supposed to use this output. Like, really cool stuff. I have no idea what kind of action I'm supposed to drive out of this, right? And so I think, our approach, and I think other organizations' approach as they're adopting it, is taking a lot of time up front to define what the business problem is, right? I know it sounds kind of, cliche, if you will, but I mean, if you don't know like what you can do with the data, and if you can't answer some of those simple questions, it's probably not a use case you should look at, right? But if we can start to have conversations and say, if I can provide you this information, what actions would you take with that? Okay, now we can start to nail down some actual requirements.
I think a fun one to talk about is our fun tequila company, on what they wanted to know.
Yeah, so we have an organization we work with, Clase Azul. They'll do some fun stuff with us too. If you're familiar with Clase Azul, a very up-and-coming kind of popular tequila manufacturer, right, out of Mexico. They have exploded in growth, right? They continue to triple in sales, quadruple in sales year over year. Huge marketing campaigns. They wanted to be able to see, based on how the liquor world works, right? How you have to work through a distributor in the U.S. You can't sell your product directly to consumer for the most part, right? They wanted to see, where is our product really ending up, right? And because we are a luxury brand, and that's how we want to brand ourselves, we want to make sure our tequila, which by the way, we can't manufacture enough of because it's sold out everywhere, we want to make sure it's getting to the fancy golf courses, the Michelin star restaurants. We don't want it to go to the mom and pop liquor store down the shop because that's hurting our brand, right? And so what we were able to do for them is help them integrate with their distributor information, so we can actually see, their depletions, and then actually mash that up with Michelin star restaurants and kind of all of their lists. I've learned more about Michelin star restaurants over the last few months than I would ever thought I would have. But it's kind of cool because now for the first time, the owners of that company can say, by the states that have Michelin star restaurants, which is like New York, Chicago, California, and DC area, I think it's really about it in the U.S. They can now see what's actually getting there, and now they can have those educated conversations with the distributor. Now, legally they can't force them to do things, but they can kind of nudge them and say, hey guys, don't want to go to that liquor store down the street. We need to get more in these restaurants. So just, kind of some cool decisions there.
If you haven't seen their bottle, it's that fancy ceramic bottle that's like blue and white. You'll see it in all different colors. That's just fix the different size. And partner that story to, I have a friend who has an exploding liquor company out of Dallas. If you've seen those buzz balls in the liquor stores, I was literally traveling with her a couple months ago in Nashville at a conference, and in her hotel room, because she doesn't have what you have for Clase Azul, we called 10 liquor stores, and I had to call 5 and see if they had our product. Because they don't know where this back to this whole liquor world of depletions and where it's going. But another thing on the tequila, they can even get down to the zip code of the average income in that zip code, and they know what could they tell? Like their surgeon was buying. It was what suburb was that in Minnesota?
Yeah, so there's an ultra tequila that they sell. It's like $1,000 a bottle or something like that, right? We found the one bottle that got shipped to Minnesota, and we found the zip code it was sold in, and we believe we were able to even figure out the actual liquor store it was at. It's kind of funny. So you get to these details, right? So. Common themes here. We do work with companies outside of the liquor industry as well, but just some fun stories there. So, but yeah, back to this and defining the business problem, right? I think it's super important, right? I know it's cliche or maybe seems like common sense, but I don't know how many times, right? We in the past have gone way too far down the road without really defining some of that stuff. It's just kind of important. And then the data side itself, right? I think Ronnie, you touched on this, right? Being able to identify what data is already readily available and what data do you actually need to support these use cases, super critical, right? So getting down to that. And then I had talked about this a little bit earlier. This is one thing that we're doing a lot more of, is that rapid prototyping concept. Again, avoiding that scenario where we go into a cave for 6 months and come out and say, hey, here's what we got for you. Week 1 of a project, we're showing you real results on what we mean by predictive analytics, what we mean by our data science use cases. So I think that really helps kind of reassure the business partners that we're working with that we, A, know what we're doing, and B, we can hit the marks and try to meet some of these business problems that are trying to be faced. And more importantly, I hate to say it, but we can fail faster too, right? And that's just as important to me, because if we can identify what's not working very quickly, let's scrap it and move on to the next thing, right? And then finally, the deploy and productionalization of these models, right? And that's where I think it ties into the rapid prototyping and the testing of it. But then it's partnering with your IT team to figure out how are we going to really scale this up, right? How are you going to deploy this to the organization once we feel like we have everything that we need in place? And I won't spend too much time on this, but this is just a little bit more of a deeper dive here. And I think we can kind of share these slides with everybody after the fact. So, kind of walk through this a bit. But I wanted to walk through this too, just to give you a sense of some of the output that we can create kind of on this rapid prototyping type scenario. So this is one of the things that we do quite a bit when I talk a little bit about that data forensics concept, right? I know this is really small here on the screen, but just to give you a quick sense of what I'm talking about. Up top, we have some box and whisker plots that are showing kind of our mins, our max, our medians, and our means, right? And then very easily be able to see our outliers. This is something that with your data we can do on a day one basis, right? And sometimes it's fairly eye-opening. So what I have here on top is a full year of data and just being able to see the distribution, and this is from a retailer standpoint, of sales by day, right? Just an interesting data point. Down below, breaking this down into all the weeks of the year, right? And you can see from a retailer standpoint, there's some outliers here, right? That are associated probably to holidays, things like that. But when you break this down even more, now we can go into our months right? You can see some outliers from a November perspective, probably Black Friday, right? You can see some outliers in July, probably around the 4th of July holiday, right? But you start to do some real easy forensics on your data, and this gets back to the sense of garbage in, garbage out. What are we really working with, right? How many outliers do we have? When we have very few outliers, from a statistical modeling perspective, much easier to work with, right? Breaking this down from a quarter and then to a year perspective. So actually, I apologize, we had 3 years of data for this entire sample. So just kind of a cool outlier detection exercise that helps remove some of that mental math. But then when you break it down into a predictive approach, right, one of the things that we like to do is incorporate confidence intervals to make sure that not only do you have values that are pushing out into the future, but you have some context around how accurate they may be based on historical trends, based on active live data, right? And so, the theory is, right, the skinnier or the more narrow this kind of gray area is here with our confidence intervals, the more accurate the line is being plotted, right? And so just more kind of incorporation from a traditional statistical sense along with more advanced kind of innovative algorithms, right? So the best of both worlds there. And then when you break this down into even a little bit more detail, and I apologize, I know it's kind of small on the screen, there's a question earlier though around accuracy of the different algorithms that are out there today versus maybe what was out there in the past, right? This is an example of far left is all actuals. This is assuming kind of the start of our prediction when we started to run our model. And then you'll see here, I know it's really hard to see, but we have a linear regression model as well as that Facebook profit model. And we kind of map this out to see how actuals have actually trended against both models. And you'll see that, in some cases, this profit model has picked up our seasonality a lot closer. And then there's other areas where our linear regression model has not been as effective. So this is another thing that we like to do when we start to explore predictive analytics with customers we partner with, is not just say, we're only going to use one algorithm and just call it quits. We'll try a few different things to see what works best with your data set. I think that's really important. And I'll share one quick story about this from an actionable perspective at a retailer in town that we work with. So one of the things they're doing today that has really changed the way their category finance teams approach their monthly reporting is we actually take kind of their official forecast, if you will, and we bring this into their analytics engine. So that if you look at a line graph like this, they can see actuals, month to date, as well as their official forecast that they're reporting to leadership on. But then on a daily basis, we're running that Facebook profit model so that what this does for them is a predictive model is great, right? If it's more accurate, sure, that's helpful. But what value is that really driving to the business? That's where this comes into play, right? Because if you're missing your official forecast by 12% in the middle of the month, okay, that's a helpful context to be able to share with leadership, right? But how about if you could tell them we're missing it by 12% halfway through, but based on our predictive model, I actually think we're going to beat it by 5, right? And that's, I think, where the message comes in, when you can bridge the gap and not have to wait until next month to run a new forecast, right? And when you're running these algorithms on a daily basis, it just gives you more line of sight on when you're missing and when you have variances mid-month, are you going to be able to make those up, right? And so if you break that down to a category standpoint, imagine the conversations that all the category managers can be having with those analysts then, right? So, yeah.
So, I wish I had a nickel for every time you were sitting there and going, how can sales always be so wrong?
Sure. Sure.
And, it draws the debate of what's better. Should we just go completely to statistical forecasting and do something there, or is it really worth going through deal flow, CRM, watching deal progression, and getting a view from sales? I mean, from doing this probably hundreds, thousands of times with different companies, where do you sit on that camp in terms of why bother with the deal flow? Just do statistical because you're going to be better off and it's going to be a lot less stressful for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a culture thing a bit too, right? I think that's one of maybe the biggest hurdles that sometimes we have, right? I use like the Moneyball analogy, right? Like, the baseball movie, right? Traditional scouts, right? They can watch that pitcher pitch, no analytics. I know that guy's going to be a stud, right? Where, Bean has his models, right? So it's a little bit of that culture, right? There's analysts that think, hey, I had a secret sauce, it's all up here, right? I know when that deal's going to close and no statistical model could ever tell me that. right? And so I think until you shift the paradigm on the culture side,
Yes.
I think that's number one. But then I think from there, I would absolutely say a statistical model, at least it's easier to have conversations with because you're kind of removing the emotion from it, from a starting place. Is that, I know I'm kind of,
We're dodging
I
the
don't know if I'm
answer.
setting up there or not, but.
Yeah.
I mean, our customer teams that have been very successful with doing this, they always joke that the next company they get to, they will do exactly what you're describing.
Yeah.
But to your point, you have to be careful because if they walk into the new organization and say that, there could be a group of people going, "Oh, are you kidding? Like, we're not doing that. Who are you? You're a bull in China shop, you know." So it's like it is that whole culture thing that really. But the thing is you can make strides and have insights. I mean, this is. I mean, in this retailer's case, which happens to be a large one, this is millions of dollars of impact by seeing this.
And so, when you talk about actionable decisions, the other thing we're doing, at a lot of retailers in town or across the U.S. is we're taking these predictive models and we're trying to drive bigger outlier analysis from an inventory standpoint. So imagine from an executive level, if you can just come in every morning and have a dashboard that shows me prediction-wise what's going to be high sales, what's going to be low inventory going into the holiday season, and what's going to be the opposite of that. I mean, that is actionable decisions. You make a few decisions based on that information, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars for your organization in cost savings or additional sales because you're reducing stockouts, right? And I think when you can start to kind of take the finance use cases, if you will, and bring them to the operations side as well, and that's where you get the whole organization kind of clicking together in synergy, that's the harmony state, right? So I know we're running out of time. I see the time check. So yeah, so just two seconds here. I think talked a lot about predictive analytics today, right? We also do a lot of other popular models here that I just wanted to kind of share with you guys. Ronnie, you brought this up earlier. Employee attrition, one that's popping up a lot lately. Customer churn is a big one. Fraud detection, especially in the financial institution space, has been big. And then the ones up top we've kind of talked about quite a bit. Shameless plug for us, would encourage you, if you are interested in this at all, right, reach out to us. You'll have our contact information. We like to do what we call a fast start program. Again, try not to boil the ocean. This is a very low barrier to entry. We work with you guys to do some whiteboarding sessions, really map out what you're trying to accomplish, and then help you identify kind of in a quadrant perspective, what is high impact with kind of low technical aptitude, that low-hanging fruit. Let's attack that first, right? And then we kind of help build a roadmap for you guys, and you decide where you want to take it from there. So
That's it.
with that being said, yeah, really appreciate the time here today, guys. I love the interaction and the feedback. And Ronnie, thanks for being our unicorn in the back there. Much appreciated.
Next year at this time, we hope we have more people with
Yeah,
their hands
exactly.
up that are using this. Like, we've got to make progress throughout the baby steps.
Exactly. So thank you very much and enjoy the lunch.
Great, thank you guys.
Thank you.